Now this is an interesting image. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words. We'll see how many words we can get out of this image. So that's an image of God as a father. Now what does it mean? What does it mean for there to be a father first? And this is a father who brings light. And maybe you were fortunate enough to have a father that brought light. Not everybody is. Tammy was. I was. I know the people that I've interviewed who've thrived, almost all of them had a father that brought them light, who encouraged them and who stood behind them, who was dedicated to developing and encouraging the best in them. Okay, so what is that exactly? Well, you might say that's your father, but you have to observe that father is actually a generic term, right? You don't call your father his name, unless you're Bart Simpson. You call your father a generic name. And that means in some sense that you're referring in your relationship with him to, you could say, a role he's playing. That's one way of looking at it, a part he's playing. Or you could say that you're referring to something deep that he's embodying insofar as he's a good father. That's a better way of thinking about it. Now, here's a way of understanding that. Imagine you're 3 years old. And your eyes are open, man, and everything's coming in at you. You know how imitative 3-year-olds are? You send a 3 or 4-year-old off, even well-behaved 3 or 4-year-old off to daycare, and they come back completely infested with demons. And I saw this in my son all the time. He'd come back from daycare, this kid who was reasonably civilized, he'd only have to be there for an hour, and he'd pick up some pathological pattern of miserable misbehavior from some wretched little brat with parents who were foolish, and he'd come home and play that out. It was like, what the hell do you think you're doing? You know perfectly well that's not going to go very well. It's like, no, he's absorbed that sucker, and he was going to see if that was a trick that would work at home. It's like, kids are very good at this. They absorb spirits. That's a good way of thinking about it. Now, we're very imitative human beings. We're unbelievably imitative. Like if you're socially skilled, you don't even know this. If you're socially skilled, when you're sitting and talking to someone, you're dancing with them. And if you recorded your interactions and you sped it up, you'd see that. Two people who are really engrossed in a conversation, they're just dancing. That's been done with mothers and babies. Depressed mothers don't dance with their babies, right? And it's because they're they've withdrawn within, and they're not attending to the relationship, and the babies suffer as a consequence. And so you dance with someone, and you absorb their spirit, or you create a spirit between you when you're conversing. And if you're both pursuing the truth when you're conversing, then you jointly construct the spirit that pursues the truth, and that inhabits you, and that fills you with enthusiasm. And that's the logos that Tammy made reference to earlier, that Christ described as present if 2 or more were gathered in his name. That's what that means. Now, children are very imitative, and it's really the basis of their knowledge. And so when you first start to adapt to the world, you learn how to move in it, right? But you learn how to imitate movements in the world in a complex way. If a child does something interesting, you'll have seen this with 9 months old, you would try to feed them, say 13 months. They're in their high chair, you're trying to feed them, and then they knock something off the high chair table and top, and it falls on the ground, and that's pretty interesting. And so then you put it back on, they knock it off again, and that's pretty interesting. And so you put it on, they knock it off again. And what they're doing actually is imitating themselves, right? Because they did something kind of random, and it produced an interesting consequence, and so they duplicate the interesting consequence, and so kids copy themselves. Now, you know that because that's how you learn to play peekaboo with them, right? You can get them into an imitative game very quickly, even if they're very young. My granddaughter, when she was 4 months old, I had her on my lap, and she was standing up, and she's very alert, this girl, and extremely extroverted, and she was really like zeroed in on me, and I thought, I wonder if I can play a game with this kid. So I went 1, 2, 3, little pause, and bonked her head on mine, like very lightly, eh? And then she kind of looked, and then I was slow and careful with her because babies are slow, you know, which is a good thing. And then I did it again, and I kept repeating it, and she caught on. She got the pattern, right? She was starting to align herself with it. And then I did it like 6 times, let's say, to establish the pattern. And then the 7th time I counted, and I didn't bop. I moved her forward, but I didn't bop heads with her, and she laughed. And I thought, perfect. She got that theme and variation, right? That's part of a game. That's what you do when you play peekaboo too. And there's mimicry in that. You set up a pattern, then you repeat it, then you repeat it, then you repeat it, then you vary it, like interestingly, and that's a game. And that's a social interaction, and that's the structure on which all of our social interactions are predicated, right? A certain predictability of interaction with a leaven of novelty. There's something deeply musical about that. Now, children will imitate themselves, but they'll also imitate their father. So now, let's imagine we have kids who are 4 years old, and it's a boy and a girl, and they're trying to get to know each other. And so what they are going to try to figure out is, could they play a game together? Which is, by the way, what you're doing when you get to know someone, at least under optimal circumstances. And so maybe the boy says to the girl, or vice versa, would you like to play house? Which means, would you like to dramatically re-represent a domestic environment spontaneously in your behavior? But generally that isn't what 4-year-olds say. They just compress that. Would you like to play house? And the girl who's invited has to say yes, because if she doesn't do it voluntarily, then it's not a game. And that's something you should bloody well learn when you're 4, so you never forget it for the rest of your life. And so maybe she says yes, and then you say, well, he says, the little boy says, well, I'll be the daddy and you can be the mommy. And hypothetically, although God only knows, both of them agree that that's appropriate. And then the boy starts to act out father. But then you might ask, and this is so cool, it's so amazing, it's such a miracle. You might say, well, now he's going to imitate his father. But that's not what he does, because kids are way smarter than that. Like, if I was going to imitate someone, I'll imitate this gentleman right here in the front row. So this is what I would do. And so what I'm doing, and you know, it's kind of annoying when someone imitates you directly, even if it's a little kid, and you can do that as a joke, but what imitation means directly is that I do exactly what you do, either when you do it or a little later. But that isn't what kids do, not at all. They're so much smarter than that, and it really is a miracle. What they do is they watch their father act across repeated instances and situations, right? Thousands of them, because they're watching you like a hawk. And they're building a model of you that helps them understand you, but that is also the scaffold on which they build their masculinity. That's a good way of thinking about it. And so they're watching you like mad, and they're testing you out too. They're going to pull out every trick they can possibly manage to poke you with, just to see how the pattern that constitutes you will react to all these different experiments. That's, you might ask, why do your children misbehave? And the answer is, well, it's an exploratory tool. I mean, that's why you provoke your wife, and that's why she provokes you. It's like, who the hell are you anyways? Like, you could ask someone, but like, what do you know about who you are? It's like, you're mysterious just like everyone else. And so if you want to learn, get to know someone, you have to sneak up on them and do something a little out of the ordinary and see how they respond. And so children are doing that all the time. And while they're doing that, they're mapping you like mad. And they're learning to imitate you. And then they're not just doing that by watching you. They're doing that by watching other fathers. They're doing that by watching TV shows about fathers. They're doing that by watching movies about fathers. They're doing that by being read books about fathers. And what they're doing is they're extracting out a representation of the father as such. And then when they play, they embody that spirit and they experiment with it in real time. And if they're good at it, they can do it in a way that invites the girl to play so that she'll keep playing. And that's what you're doing if you're married. Really. And if you're doing it properly, then you're playing. And if you say, well, my marriage isn't much of a game, it's like, maybe you're not that good at playing.